Tea is hot today. The chai lattes actually needs to be microwaved a little bit. Despite the waning temperature of the tea, I think this is going to be a fairly moderate sort of tea session. I like to pick my battles, and this will always forever be a battle that I pick, and that is toxicity. Anything that is detrimental to the subculture. And when it comes to the detriment of people themselves and causes harm, here I am. But that being said, fun fact, I had my therapist completely swear me off TikTok. The anxiety and just the not good that it was doing for me. And it wasn't anything goth related, ironically. It was actually related more toward like sort of social political situations. And you know how these things are. They play to your fears, and they play to your fears in such a way that you consume more because you kind of hinge your safety on what you're seeing, and when you kind of read into it, you buy into it, you consume more and more because you're so terrified that should you miss a single moment, you might miss something detrimental to where you become in danger. I'm what you would call hypervigilant. I feel like that's an understatement to say that I'm hypervigilant. It sucks. It's something that I have to actively work on, actively deal with, and I spent the majority of my life without health insurance and access to any form of health care, and as a result, my body, my brain suffered. And I will forever and always be grateful and never take for granted the fact that I have health insurance now, and I'm using that to heal, become better. However, all of that stuff aside, that's not what this video is about. It is regarding sort of TikTok and that temperament, but it's more as it relates to goth. And like I said, this is going to be a hill that I die on, and it's going to be something that I will forever pick as a battle. And I'm very careful with the battles that I pick because I don't like anything that causes stress. I like to keep things fun and lighthearted and happy here. We're going to keep it reasonable. We want to keep it helpful. We want to keep things on track to where it's not a complete and total flame war against like a group of people, but it's more things that are enriching and that's going to help us, but still pointing out the bullshit. So let's talk about the bullshit. So when I first started making goth content on TikTok, it was more along the lines of to like dispel all of the misinformation that was there. And there was quite a lot. And I wanted to kind of provide a kind of my take on things, you know, things that I grew up with, things that I have always been familiar with in my experiences within the community. And there was just some really stupid ones out there. And I don't like to use that term loosely, but you had people saying that I'm goth because I like to be. So to kind of diminish the goth subculture, particularly a goth girl, into somebody who likes to be physically assaulted during an intimate act, not only does it discredit the subculture itself, and it also is a falsehood that puts us in danger. It's, you know, no other way to put it. Because when you're putting that out there and kind of relaying it as gospel, and then there are other people following suit, what that does is it plants a seed into anyone else that sees it and that isn't part of the subculture, and then they believe that. So when they believe that you, as a goth girl, a girl that's part of a subculture, but you're here innocently sort of like wandering about in your subculture, dressed in the way that you dress because you are a goth, and suddenly you have somebody who's outside the subculture, they've consumed this content and they believe these kinds of things, they don't approach you gently. They don't ask you simple questions. They're not calm and conversational. They're aggressive. So it's a dangerous situation to be put in altogether. And almost immediately after I was making content on TikTok, one of the types of people that I became acquainted with are the performative activists. And I know a lot of you have seen these kinds of people where they're not really standing for any particular cause. They are filming themselves sort of talking about different causes or talking about doing your part and doing these things when they're not actually doing them themselves. They're not actually believing in it themselves. And they're finding other people and they are attacking and chastising those people for not doing those things. Well, they themselves are not doing those things, if that makes sense. But you have this performative activism where it's simply just virtue signaling. Then you also have the struggle bus. So they love to ride the struggle bus for so many different reasons. So they'll pick things from the struggle bus and it's designed to make you feel bad for them. And they will try to pick as many things as they possibly can to tick off on their list to make them rank higher on the struggle bus, because somehow that gives them a bit of a moral high ground, so that when they use their platform, and this is what's most important, they like to use their platform as a way to attack other creators and create drama, because it's this weird combination where struggle, I have all of these issues, feel bad for me, and then they attack people. Attacking people is their kind of form of gaining popularity, so they use this to draw more attention, because I have had, I want to say, 4 of these people attempt to use me in a way that furthers themselves. So they try to create this fabricated drama, and they choose something off the list. So the way that they tend to function, I know this is sort of like, I'm kind of dancing around it. So they have the struggle, they have the performative activism. So this kind of raises them in esteem and the moral high ground, but also gains the sympathy of other people. But then when they attack you, and you either disagree with them or you defend yourself, no matter what you do, because of that preface of the feigned philanthropy as well as whatever struggles they've decided to tick off the box, you defending yourself or you disagreeing with them will always look like punching downward. So they use this feud that they've fabricated and created with you as a way to try to cancel anybody that disagrees with them, but also further themselves, because everything they do is monetized. It's either their content is monetized or they have a GoFundMe and they're consistently asking for handouts, because something will always come up. They will find themselves homeless, or their car will, the wheels exploded, something. You know, all the people that are following them and they're rooting for them because they believe the whole struggle bus routine, they just give them money, and this further perpetuates their behavior, and you're just emboldening them. And it's like, it's aiding and abetting bad behavior. But how does this relate to Goth, right? I'll tell you. So when you have a person who is this entitled to attach themselves to every possible struggle that they can, that means that they want to be part of every possible thing. And the concept of a music-based subculture, such as Goth, that kind of has requirements, right? When it's a music-based subculture, and it's not just Goth that's music-based, you know? You got punk, you have metal, you have emo. There are lots of different music-based subcultures other than Goth. But despite the other music-based subcultures that are out there, they like to kind of attach themselves to Goth. They also like to attach themselves to punk, because I think there's like a level of like grit and toughness that comes along with that, which they also don't have, but they like to pretend they have. So when you have this whole idea of music-based subcultures, that kind of outlines the concept of something that has a core, and it has like prerequisites. They're not big ones. You don't have to like sign a form and give your blood. It's one thing, you listen to the music. No different than punk, no different than metal, right? You just simply listen to the music. However, when you have something like that, like a music-based subculture that has a rule in order to be part of it, they don't like that, because these are people that come from such levels of entitlement that they've not been shown the door for anything. They've been allowed to participate in everything because they've been given a pass by way of their feigned philanthropy, the performative activism, and then the struggle bus, which makes you feel sympathy for them. So nobody cares to check them, because again, it seems like you're punching downward. So when they see things like music-based subcultures, and you're out here saying, Goth is a music-based subculture, that utterly infuriates them, because you're telling them that they can't be part of that very thing, because they can't be bothered to listen to the music. So when I'm sat here making content and I want to promote different bands that are part of the subculture, or I want to talk about my experiences or how supporting different things within the subculture, it helps keep it alive, or talk about the history, because I do have a very long history within the subculture, these are things that are like super near and dear to me. And I have such amazing memories, and I want to share those memories with you, and I want you to be able to have those memories as well. So it's something very sentimental and positive. But then you have these people who come in and they are pissed, because you've essentially, by way of sharing your experiences and given people information on how to support the bands within the scene or the scene itself, by way of doing that, you have somehow slammed the door in their face and told them that they can't be part of it. And I don't see what is so difficult about just listen to the music. Give it a try. I promise you, under the umbrella of Goth, there is something for everyone. Honestly, anybody that is interested in the subculture, I challenge you to listen to not just every subgenre, but everything that is adjacent. And I guarantee you, you will find 2 genres, maybe 1 subgenre and 1 adjacent that you absolutely love. Guaranteed. Because despite the fact that there are these different subgenres, and they are different in many ways, they all kind of carry that same spirit. When they hear this, and this is a lot of what you hear, because you are met with this really aggressive pushback, and I've had this done to me. So when I've made this content on TikTok, I've had several people, different times, because I disagreed with what they said and they disagreed with what I said. Hey, Goth is a music-based subculture. All are welcome. Just because it's a music-based subculture, you may not want to be part of it. That doesn't stop you from wearing the clothes. Fashion is something entirely different. Fashion is subjective. Fashion is a form of expression. You like Goth fashion, you wear it. You want to hang with the Goth people, we will never shut you out. You want to come to the club with us, come to the club with us. But being part of a music-based subculture, I mean, it's not a stretch and it's not anything outlandish to say. You listen to the music within that subculture. Go to a metal gig and say to people, metal has evolved. It doesn't need the music anymore. Tell me how it went for you. Because I can guarantee not well. You know, when I was younger, we had in the subculture, we didn't just have the Goths. We had friends that were just straight up skaters. We had metalheads. We had hardcore kids, punk kids, people that were just from every different part of different sort of alternative subcultures, right? And they loved being part of the Goth stuff. They'd like, yeah, I love that Goth shit. And they would always get involved. And we would be invited to their parties. Remember, there was a skater crew. We called them Rad Crew. We were always invited to the Rad Crew events. Those things were always overlapping. And there was never any animosity. And they even listened to some of the music. And they never chose to be part of the subculture. They just liked coming to the things because they thought it was a lot of fun. So I'm coming from a place where everyone is welcome. You subscribe to the number 1 rule. And that number 1 rule is always don't be an asshole. And that should be a rule that we all follow, right? Just don't be an asshole. And being accepting of others doesn't necessarily mean taking in everyone and their bullshit. I cannot tell you, just by being on TikTok alone and one person on Facebook, simply disagreeing with somebody, disagreeing over the concept of music, can suddenly get conflated and turned into me being transphobic by simply stating that Goth is a music-based subculture. I don't see, personally, number 1, anything wrong with wanting to protect one subculture, because subcultures are a place where a lot of people can find themselves, and they are genuinely a home for a lot of people. It's a place where I found a home. And again, not playing the struggle best card, but given the things that I've been through throughout my life, from starting before I was even born, the subculture has always been a place where I felt welcome. It was a place where I finally felt myself, and it was a place where I truly had found my home. So it's natural for somebody to want to protect that. And a lot of people do it under the guise of, oh, well, it's evolution. Surely you know this. This is just evolution. Something can evolve, but that doesn't change the organism you descended from. We can suddenly decide that we want different hair. We can suddenly decide that there are more subgenres to music, which has happened. We have a lot more subgenres now. But that doesn't change the organism from which we descended. So all of these crazy mental gymnastics and trying to get somebody canceled and labeled something really horrific. I mean, you have a lot of people that are talking about like censorship and stuff like that, ironically, it's the same people that carry out this type of behavior, the whole like censorship thing, but they are the biggest hypocrites themselves. They're the ones that really tell on themselves, because they don't like censorship, but they censor people in more underhanded and malicious, sort of manipulative kind of ways. When they go through that much trouble to paint the picture of somebody who's so incredibly oppressed and ticks the boxes of so many different oppressed groups, just to show you how hard they ride that struggle bus, but also team it up with this performative activism, just as a preface to where any future bad behavior would be excused. And the moment you simply disagree with them, and it's never over anything big. Like I said, it's always been, Goth is a music-based subculture. Are you telling me I can't be part of the Goth subculture? No interest in it whatsoever, hates the music, but they can't fathom somebody saying that they'd be excluded from something, that they will pick one of those items from their struggle list and they'll brand you with that. Not only will they brand you with that, but they'll create memes that slander you over it. They'll create video after video slandering you over it, trying to get you canceled, but every single one of those things is monetized. So they're not only leeching off of you in order to gain some semblance of popularity, but everything that they create to slander you and cancel you has all been monetized. So you really have to kind of understand that temperament and that mindset, and that's what exists on TikTok. Not only that, but it exists elsewhere, because I've dealt with it elsewhere. But the other stuff that exists on TikTok, which are things that I really cannot abide, is the way that goth girls are portrayed. And it's more and more being bastardized, and it's being used in the Rule 34 sense. And everybody's familiar with Rule 34. It's taking it too far, because as I said previously, it takes different people and it puts us in dangerous and precarious situations, because you have lots of other people now that consume this media, people that are outside the subculture and that are looking in at this, and they see these girls where they're posting a lot of OF content or just completely sexually based content, dressed in what they would consider goth attire, which is essentially just girls in black clothing that are alternative, but they like to use the hashtag and they like to use the term goth, and they're being overtly sexual, they're being abusive toward themselves, or they're portraying themselves as people who are into violence in a more intimate nature. And when they do that, they create this buzz around us that's completely untrue. Because let's face it, like, the truth about goth, that's not something that gets clicks. It's not something that gets views. Music, cool. But when you add something a little bit more salacious to the mix, when you add sex and violence and daddy issues and substance abuse and all of the other things that they attach to it, suddenly it's interesting. It's something that they're drawn to, and it's something that people who want to be edgy, they want to ascribe to that. But the problem is, you have all the people that are outside this, that don't know anything about the actual goth subculture. They take it as gospel. And then they look at us and they think that we ourselves are like that. They can become so obsessed with the actual fantasy of it that when you hit them with the reality, like, you reject them. They approach a goth girl says no. Because a lot of what's being portrayed is, we don't say no. And when they hear that no, and we don't live up to the very fantasy that they have kind of built up in their heads, which is not completely fabricated because they've seen it elsewhere. That was fabricated. But within themselves, they're just sort of buying what's been sold to them. And a lot of these people are a little bit unstable and not very, not people you'd want to be alone with. But here's what happens when you challenge that perception, and then they're met with the reality, and you're not living up to that.
And I'm having the time of my life right now. This is like the funnest time I've had in weeks. So this chick, this goth chick, I got into it with.
Oh man, I am a danger though. I'm a danger to you. I thought we had something special. We were supposed to be like Bonnie and Clyde. Oh man, it sucks that you had to make me do this. Oh, Angela. I'll see you again, babe. We'll meet in Agartha one day. I can't wait to see you then.
And that's just online. Imagine when that happens in person. Gonna reheat my tea. Reheated to perfection. Okay. Forget where I was. So I know I'm kind of jumping back and forth between like kind of different things, but when you have a lot of the different people who are of the school of, oh, Goth has evolved, Goth is just a mindset, blah, 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 a lot of the thing is they find themselves attracted to the subculture for whatever reason. Some of them are just jerks and don't like to be told that they can't be part of something. And the thing is, we're not telling them they can't be part of it. We're simply telling them that it's a music-based subculture. And the whole idea of music-based subcultures piss them off so much because it tells them they need to do something first. And how dare you not give them preferential treatment? A lot of these people who throw their toys out of their cot, so many of us would happily accept them at the events. You want to be friends with Goths? Goths are not going to turn you away. We're fairly open-minded people, and yeah, we're probably going to try to make you mixtapes and get you to listen to the music, but it's not the end-all be-all. It doesn't mean we're still not going to invite you to the parties. Doesn't mean we're not going to invite you out to the clubs. Come to the clubs with us. Come to the diner with us. Come have some disco fries and angst. I don't know. It doesn't mean that you're shut out. It doesn't mean that the door is slammed in your face. You could still be part of it. It's just that to be considered part of a music-based subculture, you listen to the music. All right, it's leg on chair time. Does anybody else sit like that? I always sit with one foot under my ass and then one knee up. Like even when I'm eating, I have to sit like this. Call it being a Libra with my scales of justice, and call it my aggro Aries moon, who knows. But there's something about manipulative people who seek out and victimize other people solely for their own interests that make me absolutely angry with rage. And seeing this exist within the Goth community, and again, Goth community, they're not really part of the subculture. They position themselves in such a way to where it seems like they are. I don't understand that mindset. You know, surely this is the subculture. We love the subculture. We want it to stay. We want to do what we can for it. Like, we want to promote different bands. But speaking of supporting the scene, speaking of supporting bands, I've been listening to Male Tears, total digression. I've been listening to Male Tears all day. And let me just tell you, like certain bands have like some filler songs. Almost every frickin' song that I've listened to thus far is a fucking banger. Take a listen. They're here on YouTube. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Bandcamp, Spotify. I say this as the song Leave It Alone has been on repeat in my head because it was the last song I listened to before coming to film. I wasn't kidding. I was listening to it all day. It got me motivated to clean and do what I needed to do in the apartment. So thank you, Male Tears. So the point of this video, I guess, is to kind of illustrate that getting away from that whole mindset that really exists on TikTok, but it does exist elsewhere. I think for the most part it's more concentrated on TikTok, but getting away from that was helpful. Getting away from the political stuff was helpful as well, a lot, but getting away from just the very problematic people that like to cause drama and cause issues. That's basically their whole MO. Performative activism, and then starting fights with complete strangers and making loads of content that fills that. And then they go back to the performative activism, and then they find somebody else to kind of focus on. But unfortunately, it's not just designated to TikTok. It just seems to be concentrated there. So it's important that we recognize it when we see it, because a lot of these people are also, they're e-beggars, massive e-beggars, and I've seen a lot of people give up a lot of money to these kinds of people only to realize later that they were just sort of being used and manipulated. So hold on to your pennies unless you really know that this person truly is in need. This needs to be reheated. Reheat the tea. It's microwave, so we do the microwave dance. So many of you know this weird fact about me is that I used to like make goths when I was in high school. I would just kind of choose random people and be like, you're coming to my house this weekend. You're going to come hang out and we're going to listen to music and we're going to go to a goth night. And they would do it. I'd never been turned down. And the majority of the people that I did that to, they stayed with the subculture because they liked it. And I think maybe not to that extreme, because nowadays that could be seen as kind of predatory and you're kind of trying to kidnap them and harvest their organs or something, which Don't do that. But I think that if we kind of take that approach when it comes to people, where you have baby bats or you have people who are like, well, I'm a goth, but I don't like the music. And it seems like they just don't really understand much of the subculture. So long as they don't have any red flag issues, so long as they're not really being overtly cruel or mean or manipulative or anything like that, try to engage them in a conversation when it comes to the subculture and introduce them to some music, because there's no harm in doing that. If somebody has the time to go on a message board and talk a bunch of crap, you have the time to listen to half a song from a band of your choosing. And sometimes it's a matter of just kind of like, I ask people questions when they tell me they don't like goth, or they say that they're looking for goth music that they would like. I ask them what they do listen to. You know, what do you listen to now? And that tends to be helpful. I'm like, do you like things that are more synthy? Do you like things that have a lot of guitars? Like, what are you listening to now? And you can kind of tailor the things that they listen to what you would recommend. So for example, if I get a person who's listening to, say, a little bit more metal or symphonic metal, I'm going to recommend things like Switchblade Symphony, more Syphilitica, Requiem in White, maybe even a little bit of Darkwave thrown in there. And that tends to be a good bridge into it, because there are some similarities there in the sense that the vocals are very dramatic and operatic, and symphonic metal tends to have that same thing. However, if you have a person who listens to more punk, try to show them death rock. Death rock tends to resonate with people who listen to punk. If you have a person who is listening to things like Deftones, show them ethereal and shoegaze music, because it has that more sort of like slow droning, even though it's somewhat bright, there is an unmistakable darkness to it that also connects with them. So it's really a matter of comparing the music that they listen to the subgenres that you know. Sometimes, you know, even if it doesn't hit, they will appreciate you trying, because it's not that you don't want them to be part of the subculture. And I think that's where a lot of it comes from. They think maybe, not all of them, a lot of them are jerks, but for the most part, I think you also have people who genuinely want to be part of the subculture, and they think that you don't want them. So it's important to kind of show that they're not being gatekept. They're not being told that we don't want them to be part of it. They need to be shown that we do. We want them to be part of it. And it's really funny too when people kind of meet the whole concept of people giving them information, giving them insight, giving them, even telling them stories about their experiences. They will respond to that by saying, oh, you're gatekeeping me. Gatekeeping that's the antithesis to gatekeeping. Surely if I were gatekeeping, I would be fired from gatekeepery and like given bad reviews, and I wouldn't get a reference my next gatekeeping job, because giving people information, handing someone the keys is not gatekeeping. You're trying to keep somebody out. You want to deter them as much as possible. You want to be mean to them, rude to them, nasty to them. You don't want to give them any information, because if you're gatekeeping them, you don't want them to know anything. You don't want them, because to give them information is to give them that power. You don't want them to have that. When trying to bring somebody to your level, and I don't mean that like, you know, goths are above here and everybody's below, but what I mean is with regards to like our knowledge of goth or where we stand within the subculture. When you're trying to bring somebody to that level and not trying to push them down, that's the opposite of gatekeeping. We want you to be part of it, and we're just trying to help you get there. So it's really important to kind of distinguish the difference there. But you know, when you have a person who's completely unreceptive and they're just combative over and over and over again, they've heard the music, they don't like the music, or they don't care to know the music, they just want the title. You know, all glory, no guts, right? And I don't understand that. I mean, you can call yourself a goth until the cows come home, but if you're not listening to the music, there's no shame in having goth friends. There's no shame in going to goth events, and no one's going to shun you. You're supporting it. Why would they? And that's really the thing that keeps it alive anyway, is the support. You want to support the bands. You want to support the people who keep the club nights going. You want to support the publications and things like that, because those are the things that keep it alive. And everything else that I spoke of the people who do things performatively and try to cancel others, especially goth creators, because they're so entitled that they want access to a subculture, but they're going to actively not only slander those in it, but they're going to spread ridiculous quantities of misinformation about it. These are the people that cause damage to that subculture. They cause damage because they get baby bats who want to find it, and suddenly they can't because they're putting these little roadblocks in place. I'm here talking about music, but when they're there talking about sex and daddy issues and fights and discourse they have with other people, that's obviously going to take precedence because that's what gets into the algorithm. That's what's going to get the most views, not the music. So when they automatically find them first, they could very well become deterred because now they have no idea what the goth scene is. And then once this person gets in their head, what do they know about goth? Nothing. Because they haven't actually found the subculture. They, in their minds, they're baby bats, they're trying. They may think that they have. And what might end up happening is they see all of this going on and they're like, I'm not part of that life. I don't want this drama. And they say, well, I guess goth is not for me because I'm not into whatever it is that you're doing. But the unfortunate situation is they didn't find it at all, and they were kind of fed a lot of bullshit and a lot of negativity and a lot of things that goth isn't. And that's what tends to happen a lot, because all that clickbaity stuff, that will automatically take precedence over things like music. It's going to cause it to fly high in the algorithm, and then we're like deep in the weeds. So it's important that we do our part, but it sucks when you have people out there that want to stop you from doing those things because they don't like the reality of it. They don't like the truth. They don't like people telling them that they can't do the things that they want to do and they're not entitled to the things that they want. And the sad reality is they're doing it for money and they're doing it for attention and they're doing it to the detriment of a subculture that by far exceeds their own existence as far as years are concerned, not in importance. Not saying that. That would be mean. So with all that being said, and my chai latte dwindling down to nothing, I slowly feel the blood leaving my caffeine stream. I'm going to end it here. And I hope this video has been helpful to you. I hope that you've enjoyed this one. And until next time, take care.